In today's video, we're back with some updated NHL trade rumors. Teams we're discussing today include the Chicago Blackhawks, the Edmonton Oilers, Ottawa Senators, Vancouver Canucks, Calgary Flames, and Carolina Hurricanes. We'll discuss all the latest coming up next. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams. So if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So as I mentioned off the top, today we're back with some updated NHL trade rumors to discuss here. Of course, we're into 2019. We're getting closer to the NHL trade deadline. We've seen a little bit of a flurry of trades here since the holiday roster freeze was lifted. And now there's a lot more speculation about what some other teams might be looking to do here as we head into the new year. We've seen teams recently like Edmonton and Chicago be extremely active in the trade market. And of course, they're teams I mentioned we're going to discuss today because it's widely believed that neither one of them are done dealing here, especially in Edmonton, as Peter Chiarelli really attempts to try to get his Oilers into the playoffs and likely save his job. I mean, many NHL insiders believe if the Oilers fail to miss the playoffs, that Chiarelli will be dismissed during the offseason and his time there will be done, and so he'll be out of work. So obviously he's going to be working hard to try to not only save his job, get his team into the playoffs, and see if he can right the ship here. So we've seen them make a flurry of moves recently, trying to improve the back end, the blue line, as they've been dealing with a lot of major injuries on the back end here. And unfortunately, that team has had a lot of hard luck when it comes to defensemen being injured this season, but it's also believed that the future is not certain for young winger Jesse Puljujarvi. Of course, as we know, when you're drafted very highly, in the first round like he was, it comes with a lot of expectations, and Puljujarvi is yet to kind of live up and meet those expectations. Although at the same time, all young players do develop at their own rate, and it doesn't mean that because they're not a superstar by the age of 19 or 20 that it's not going to happen. But as time keeps ticking away here, it does become a little bit less likely that with the current situation that we're going to see that happen. Now, unfortunately, also with the Oilers, we've seen some other players have to move on in order to find that higher level of success. I mean, we've seen guys like Taylor Hall's a prime example. Not that he didn't have success in Edmonton, but once he left and moved on to New Jersey, he even had that much more success. So you do have to be careful with these kind of moves because you just don't know what's going to happen. You don't want to, have another deal like Hall for Larson in that Oilers organization. They really can't afford to do that. So they need to be careful here with Jesse Puljujarvi. It would really be unfortunate for them if they move him, depending on what the return is, if he really finds his game and develops into the player that they were expecting when they drafted. But right now, this future is uncertain in Edmonton, and he very well might be the next trade chip that they play that try to improve this team and get him into the 2019 playoffs. As far as where he might go or what the return might be, that is not quite clear as of yet. I do think there'll be a lot of interested teams in acquiring a young winger like Puljujarvi with a lot of potential. But there's certainly an area of opportunity here for the Oilers to make that kind of deal. It's hard to say exactly what the Oilers are looking for or what the return likely would be for Puljujarvi. But I would imagine that they would want something that they can get into their lineup and help the team today. That would be my guess because obviously, like I said, they're trying to get into the playoffs here and kind of right the ship and get everything back on track. So we'll see what happens, but the Oilers are believed to be heavily considered trading Puljujarvi. And there's probably, like I said, a long list of teams that are likely interested. But at this point, talks haven't really intensified with any particular team to really draw attention to one particular club trying to acquire him. But we'll see if he remains an Oiler or not here beyond the NHL trade deadline. And of course, the other team, like I mentioned, is the Chicago Blackhawks, who've been quite active as well. Stan Bowman's pulled off some pretty decent deals, in my opinion. He's acquired a lot of young talent, and still believe that he very well might continue to do that. Some guys he might be looking to move out would be forwards like Brandon Saad and our team in Nisimov. Now, Brandon Saad has no trade protection whatsoever in his contract, so they're free to trade him wherever they can find a deal. And of course, with Nisimov, he does have a form of a no movement clause, but he with his contract, he has a 10-team list that he can move to. So it's not completely impossible, and both guys do have some kind of value that they could offer to other clubs. But obviously, when you're not having a fantastic year, your value certainly does, get drugged down. So they very well might have to include other pieces with those guys to maybe pull off a trade. It's really hard to say, but it's believed that General Manager Stan Bowman, as we know, has been quite active this year so far, that he's not done dealing to trying to look more towards the future. We've discussed possibility of some other core players, maybe being moved, but I highly doubt that happens in season. If they consider trying to move a guy like a Duncan Keith, Taves, Kane, Seabrook, any of those guys, I think out of the four that Keith would be the most likely. But I think any of those guys, if they're ever moved, it would be something we'd see in the offseason when teams have more flexibility with their cap situation, and the rosters aren't completely set for the year. Maybe like a deal at the draft day table or something along those lines would be something that we would see. But I think Keith probably has the most value. As far as money and term left on deals, I think Keith has the most value with his contract, with what he can provide. I don't see a lot of value on Seabrook. I see the Seabrook contract as a little bit of an albatross contract that's going to be very difficult to move. And I'm not really sure the Hawks would ever really go down the road of trading Jonathan Toews or Patrick Kane. I really do see them likely being career Blackhawks unless they go to Stan Bowman and say, listen, why don't you move me, for a chance to get the team something back and let me go on to try to win some more championships before they retire or something. I don't know. Unless they ask for a trade, I just don't see that happening. But like I said, Keith would be the only one, but I think that's more a deal for the offseason. I think if the Hawks are going to continue to deal here between now and the deadline. So I think if the Hawks are going to continue to deal between now and the deadline and they move any forwards, that the likely ones they would attempt to move would be Saad or Anisimov, and whatever the return would be, they're going to continue doing what they've been doing and trying to getting back a more younger, faster, skilled players to really get this team heading in the right direction, to balance out and get more youth and skill. So we'll see where things go, but I don't see the Hawks being done, and I think it's safe to say that they're not going to be a playoff team this year, so they're likely going to try to move out some more veterans and look towards the future as we approach February's deadline. Now jumping over to touch base on the Vancouver Canucks here quickly, there is some speculation that the Canucks may look to move forward Nikolai Goldobin. Now Goldobin's had a pretty decent season, I must say. Statistically, he's one of their top 4 or 5 scorers, but he's getting shuffled around a lot. He was a healthy scratch versus Ottawa, so it just seems like they're having a hard time finding a steady spot for him, and it just might be believed but between the coaching staff and management that they may not be completely sold on him as a long-term fit with their club, so he very well might be a player they look to move. There's also been speculation around other members of the Canucks earlier this year, which we haven't really heard much of lately. Maybe moving a defenseman like a Ben Hutton, maybe a Tanev or something like that, but we really haven't heard a whole lot about that recently, so it's hard to say if the Canucks will go down that road, but there is some talk right now within the NHL insiders that Goldobin might be available. Now, of course, jumping over to the Carolina Hurricanes here quickly, I want to discuss a pending UFA forward Michael Furlan. Now, of course, Michael Furlan was one of the pieces going to the Carolina Hurricanes from the Calgary Flames in that big draft day trade, which saw Hannafin and Lindholm going over to the Flames in exchange for Furlan and Dougie Hamilton. Of course, we saw Michael Furlan get off to an excellent start, and Carolina was scoring at a top pace, was playing in their top 6, and then unfortunately he suffered a concussion. Since he's returned, he hasn't been quite the same, hasn't been as productive. And the Hurricanes were already looking for scoring. The fact that he's a pending UFA, struggled as of late, certainly brings speculation to his name. So it's certainly a possibility that when the Hurricanes are looking to add more scoring here, that they very well might peddle the pending UFA if they're not sold on re-signing him here longer term. So we'll see what happens, but Furlan's name is a name out there that the Hurricanes may be shopping currently. Now, jumping over to another team that's has some pending UFAs and are struggling in the standings, let's discuss the Ottawa Senators. Of course, until guys like Mark Stone or Matt Duchene are signed, there is going to be speculation about their future in Ottawa. And right now, like I said, until that happens, or if it happens, then the speculation is not going to go away. Now, we've recently seen comments from Mark Stone indicating that the contract talks between him and the Senators are expected to pick up in the next couple of weeks. Now, because he signed a 1-year contract this fall before the season started, he wasn't eligible for an extension until January the 1st anyway. The way the rules work with that is the team and the player are able to have some informal talks, but can't sign anything until after the 1st. So it looks as though that the Senators and the agent for Mark Stone is going to be talking here soon, and said he'll see where these things go, but he's very interested in staying. He's played his whole career in Ottawa and doesn't want to go anywhere. So he's saying all the right things, but of course it really boils down to what the offer is going to be from Ottawa. They offer him the right price and the right term, maybe they'll lock him up. Same thing with Matt Duchene. He said all the right things about staying as well, but again, he's been a little bit less talked about lately than Mark Stone. But either way, both those guys do have some speculation around them. If the Senators don't have a commitment from them to either sign a contract, or they're confident that they're going to get them signed, then they will be traded by the deadline. They're not going to risk losing them for nothing, obviously. They're big parts of the team's future if they stay, but at the same time, they could really set the team back if they end up losing them for nothing as a free agent. So we're really, until those players are signed, the speculation will persist. I don't see Ottawa getting better enough in the second half of the season to have any shot at the playoffs. That's really all but gone. So this really boils down to where contract talks go. Of course, with the current ownership status with the Ottawa owner and everything going on with him and the lawsuits and everything like that, that's certainly not going to bode well, and certainly put a little bit of a negative twist on getting some key players signed. So we'll see what happens. But for right now, it looks like Mark Stone and Matt Duchene both have a very much of an interest to stay. They like it there. At least they say they do. And it looks as though the Senators are quite interested in getting it done. But it's just a matter if they're not able to get it done by the deadline, then there's certainly players that very well could see themselves shipped out of town. Now let's head back to Western Canada for a moment, touch base on the Calgary Flames. Of course, now Michael Frolik's a player that we've seen some talk about here recently in social media. His agent, Alan Walsh, has been very vocal through his Twitter account about his displeasure, I guess you could say, about the lack of playing time and being a healthy scratch as Frolik was for a period of time there with Calgary. So with everything going on with Frolik and his agent being so vocal about his displeasure with his lack of playing time, and the fact that the Flames really could use some help on the back end, some left side defense with Valimaki being out for an extended period of time, there's certainly at least some speculation that maybe he could be a trade chip to bring in a defenseman that they really need. Now, of course, the last team I want to touch on quickly before we go here is the Pittsburgh Penguins. Of course, they had some struggles early on in the year. They certainly have picked things up. But, of course, as we know, GM Jim Rutherford is one of the more aggressive GMs around the league. And it is believed he is seeking some help to upgrade for a playoff run for the Penguins. There's certainly a variety of possibilities they could be looking at. We don't really have any clear-cut rumors on who they're looking at or what positions exactly. But it is believed that he's been having a lot of discussions around the league with many teams. And we do expect the Penguins to be active near the deadline. So, of course, that would not come as any surprise. Like I said, he's one of the more aggressive GMs around the league. They've had a lot of success in the past, so certainly they're likely going to do something. So that's all your news and notes here on the latest NHL trade rumors for today. If you're new to the channel here, I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams, and there's plenty of content here for all hockey fans to enjoy. So if you're new, hit that subscribe button. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up before you go. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you very much for watching, everybody. We will catch you next time.